just take the closest that will work for you, for detail. If you can't get the detail, don't worry about it. Just keep shooting, go. Okay, this is a 1920 Johnson motor wheel. It was designed by Lewis Johnson, and then put in, the patents came, I think, in 1919 in the U.S. side. In 1920, it went over to the U.K. side for patent. This is the early model of the 1920 motor wheel, where the difference that some of you will see is between 1920 and 21. The 1920 early models had just this brace, which is adjustable manually, of course, by the bolt nut. For this, that was used, of course, to tighten the drive chain with. On the later models, that would have been 1921, starting with them, or that year. Then they had a rod. It was a 3/8 pipe rod, or yeah, and then threaded right and left on both ends, something similar to a turnbuckle. There were two different and possibly three different type carbs. In the UK used a different style than this one here. The difference again, back to the 1920 and 21s, is the exhaust pipe in itself. In the later models then, 1921, they had what I call a pitot tube that came out of the side, and they didn't have the perforations here for the exhaust. They also at that time had a heat shield that you don't see here, of course. It was on the outside of this tube, exhaust tube, and then of course that was meant for the intake of the carb. Why they ever did that is beyond me, because there certainly wasn't any frosting for the kind of intake that used. Then the most of the hardware, except for the block, the engine block itself, was done in nickel plating with in the electrolysis. The block in itself was called electroliths, so it was just a cold immersion. That way, it was a lot easier to keep from contaminating the cylinders with, and actually served as a better protection for the block in itself, keeping it away from rust and such. So it still looks very good just the way it is, but all the rest is nickel. The rear wheel on these models, of course, came as part of that kit, along with your engine standoffs and the brackets here that were used. And I believe they even furnished the gas line, if I can remember right. Then back to the hub that was mounted on there. It's actually a cast hub that's in two pieces. So it's split and assembled over the rear hub in itself, which is a Merrill hub. Then therefore that becomes a floating style hub, and it's held in place with compression springs, 6 of them on both sides. That was to take care of the engine inertia, basically, because it's a direct link, direct drive, basically. So there's no automatic or belt tightening to this engine. The rear rim in itself, again, as you look at it, it was a clincher style type tire, meaning that both the front and the rear, of course, were pneumatic. There is no inner tube with it. So it was a sealed style tire. The one in the back here that you're looking at, I replaced that with a normal 2 1/4 inch tire, 26 inch with the tube. The front, if we look at it, that is the original pneumatic along with the clincher style rim in itself. So this again does not have a tube. And if we can get a name on here someplace, it's not here, it'll be on the other side. I think the other side here. Yeah. It's called the United States, US, I suppose a lot of people would call it just a US tire. A number 76, giant chain tread, I think it is. And then 2-ply. And works good, still holds air. Not much as far as weather checking at all. It's very good. Then they also came with their own badge. So that in itself with the frame here then was a crown frame, like they use out of South Bend, Indiana, where they were made and produced as kits. So you got your badge with it, just removing the crown badge. So this is really a crown bike. Then lighting system was 6 volt AC, about 3 volts, very little in amperage at all. They don't even speak of it. Then it's a original horn. Of course, it's been reconditioned along with the decal that's on there, the EA. It's kind of funny too the way it reads. It reads modern metal used, and out of Brooklyn, New York. Saddle is a Truxell saddle, and I had that recovered but kept the frame part and the springs original. Underneath it's also recovered, that's the way they came. And then the toolbox or tool bag in itself, that's all original except for the buckles that I have replaced. And the gas is about a 3-quart tank. And it has a mixer for the oil. So you fill that tube, you can dump that into the tank, then fill the tank with gas, you had your mix. Horn works well. Controls for the engine are, the top one is the choke only. The bottom one is actually your throttle, and then also serves as a decompression lever. And in the 1921 models, then there was also ignition kill, so it served 3 purposes. That moves over here, what that rod does, or that lever does. It moves your cam levers, which opens the decompression valves for starting. And at the same time, in the 21 models, there was a bracket on here insulated for the ignition kill. Of course, this 20 models and earlier didn't have that. Also then, of course, it was your throttle. So the pull wire from your lever is this, and when that's activated forward, pushing the decompression part, it also opens up the throttle. Partially back on the throttle again is removing then, of course, the tension on the decompression springs, and then it's throttle wide open. Very little movement there to control from idle to the wide open spot. Basically, the thing is, the carb is almost wide open all the time anyway. And I think that just about covers it. I do have the badge for this Crown bike. It came with that. Also, I do have the manual here also with it. It goes with it. I've showed this one here before. So that's the manual. And it describes how to put it together. That's its kit form that you're looking at now. So it shows the cable with the 2 levers, of course, then the engine and the chain. The chain is a 41, number 41, by the way. And then they also describe it as notching out your fender for the chain, but if you do things right, take your time with it, you really don't have to notch the fender, and I didn't really care to do that anyway when you restore a fender or restore a bike. That's the Crown bike in itself. And I'm not sure that the badge that we're looking at, but it could have been the Crown badge. It's hard to tell. But it did come with their own badge. And they're described, of course, it is the only two-cylinder motor in the world, to drive bicycles. And they were the first. The other one that comes close to this, as far as a rear drive, and I have that engine too, and I'm probably the only one in the U.S. that does have it. It's called a Simplex. And I'm just finishing it up with the restoration of that one. And I think that just about covers it.